Right. Okay. So I'm gonna get rolling now on the presentation. Just a word on the structure. I'm going to email you all a copy of this afterwards, so please don't feel you need to write down every word of it. But I really would recommend that you, as we go through things, I'm going to be giving examples and sort of hypotheticals and asking questions. And really, it's down to you as to how you personalize this. So I'm going to be asking you to think about your business as we go through this. And I think this presentation will be more effective if you relate it to your situation, rather than just me talking about my random examples. Sorry, I'm reading. I'm distracted by the chat. Thank you. Keep them coming. Thank you very much. A calligrapher, marvelous. Okay. I do need to mention this webinar is funded by the York and North Yorkshire Growth Hub. I presume that's where most of you have found us. And I'll share their website and details later on. As we go through the presentation, there's a few times where I've used the word homework, where as if I'm sort of I've set you some homework and I'm going to be checking up on you like a teacher. Of course, I'm not. I won't be collecting it in, but it's a suggestion for how you might keep the thought process going beyond this hour. And then there might be a couple of times where I'll ask you to maybe contribute on the chat, as you've just done there. So that's really useful if I can ask you to do that. I've got one more person to come in. There we go. Right, so a very quick introduction of me. I'm Gareth Allen. I am a business coach and commercial funding broker. So I help businesses get money, and then I help them spend it wisely. And I work with all sorts of businesses. My background is I worked in retail for 10 years. I was an area manager for Carphone Warehouse. Then I was a bank manager. I worked for Barclays Bank, and I looked after a whole range of businesses from professionals to tradespeople, the whole range. It was a really good learning environment for me to learn about different types of businesses. So let me just give you what we're going to cover. So this presentation is aimed at people who are relatively new to business. So, you know, the subheading was in your first things to set up in the first year. But I think there's a lot of principles here that are relevant to everyone, wherever you are on your journey. So I'm hoping there'll be some useful stuff here. But the structure is these three categories: expectations, capability, and motivation. So expectations, what are your goals? Where are you heading? What are you expecting of yourself? Capability, so this is skills. What are you good at? What are you not so good at? What do you need to learn? Where do you need to get some help? And then motivation, which is really the glue that binds it all together. Why are you doing this? What's in it for you? Maybe that sounds a little bit mercenary. Not so much what's in it for you, but what's making you want to keep going. And how and keep going is important. Sustaining it, not just starting it. I demonstrate this with a lovely Venn diagram. So with what I'd like to sort of demonstrate how important each of these things are. Consider if you were missing one of these things. So, you know, if you started your own business, and quite often with a brand new business, you have low sense of expectations. By that, I don't mean your expectations are low, that you've got rubbish targets. What I mean is you haven't quite got a sense of direction, what you need to do to break even, how many sales you need to make, maybe what that long-term vision is. It's all a little bit manic and panicky, and we're just doing this. So you haven't quite set those clear goals for yourself yet. And the first part of today's presentation, we're going to really try and do that. The next circle, capability. So what this tends to happen is, in that first year, you come to realize what you can't do. So when you set up a business, often it's something that you're passionate about, and it will be something that you're good at. Otherwise, why would you be doing it? But there'll be things that you hadn't necessarily anticipated about running a business that will come up, and you need to improve that capability as you go along. But then motivation, and this is a real danger as that initial flurry of activity wears off. Obstacles get in the way. Obstacles will get in the way, that is guaranteed, and it can get hard. And how we overcome those obstacles is really crucial. And having a good understanding of why we are doing this will help you to when you encounter those obstacles. So that's going to be the structure of this presentation, and we'll go through them one at a time. So we'll start with expectations, and I'm going to talk about we're going to talk about the vision first. The analogy that someone once told me I really like was a tightrope walker. Now, I can't walk on a tightrope, of course I can't. But apparently, a tightrope walker they'll be balancing. And as they walk along the rope, they spend half the time looking at the horizon, keeping their balance, and then half the time just glancing down at where their feet are. And I think this is a beautiful analogy for running a business, because we need to keep our eyes on the horizon and the vision of where we're heading. But absolutely, we need to keep looking down at our feet and seeing where we are right now and what the next step is. So we'll talk about both of those things. The first thing I'm going to talk about is this vision. So what's the horizon? Sometimes called a mission statement. Where do you want to be? But this next sentence I think is really important. What will that feel like to you? Now, this vision might be a public thing. It might be private. That's okay. If it needs to be private for it to be true to you, then that's fine. But it needs to be an emotional picture of what you want your business to be. What will it feel like to your stakeholders? Oh, here's somewhere you can help me out in the chat. What do you think I mean by stakeholders? Just quickly give me some one-word answers there. I'll take a cup of tea. Oh, and while I'm waiting, welcome, Liz. I missed your comment there. So a pet food business in Pocklington. Nice to see you, Liz. On Lisa as well. Company that develops water-saving devices for commercial and residential. And also a photographer. Great. Okay, right. Back to the point. So stakeholders, thank you. They're coming through now. So we've got investors, shareholders, customers, suppliers, end users, regulators. Dawn, anybody with an interest in the business, which is absolutely correct. Yeah. Customers, employees, customers, people who supply and train you, users. Brilliant. Right. Really good answers there. I'm looking at my list and I'm wondering, I think you might have covered everything. So basically it's everyone that you engage with. So yeah, your customers, the people who buy from you, your suppliers, the people you buy from. It could be your business. Maybe you're completely self-enclosed. You're a sole director or a sole trader. Maybe you have got partners. Maybe you've got other shareholders, maybe investors. You might have employees, perhaps not yet, but at some point you might have people who are absolutely dependent on the success of your business for their livelihood. Perhaps if you come just outside of the business, another stakeholder for all of us is our family. You know, the people that we share our lives with. Again, the success of our business is crucial to them. How happy or sad we are at work is crucial to them. Perhaps even wider than that, the local community. When I say local community, that could mean different things depending on your business. So if you're a corner shop, greengrocers, they're your local community, or other people who pass by and in your little village who might be potential customers. But if you are, I don't know, I worked with someone who was a bookbinder, and they took old books and they repaired them and they did a really beautiful job. Now their community was nationwide. It was those sort of bibliophile people who love books. So community doesn't necessarily mean geographical. Another stakeholder might be the wider environment. You know, what impact do we have on the world in terms of climate change, all that sort of thing. So I've gone from customers to the world there. We're talking about stakeholders. So, you know, that can encompass a lot of things. Let me get back to the point, this idea of vision. So what does it feel like to you? What will it feel like to those other stakeholders? And let me give you some examples, some big companies here. Let me give you a disclaimer before we read through this. You might read these and think, oh, that's a bit pretentious. And that's okay, because it's only pretentious if you don't buy into it. If it's your vision, it won't be pretentious, because if you think, that's a bit, then it ain't your vision, is it? Because you don't believe it. So yours might be very matter of fact if you're that kind of person, or it might be very emotional if you're that kind of person. So Starbucks, our mission is to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. Inspire and nurture the human spirit, blimey. So it's not, we're going to sell 2 million cups of coffee this year. It's a lot more emotional. McDonald's are a little bit more specific about the experience. Our mission is to be our customers' favorite place and way to eat and drink. We're committed to continuously improving our operations and enhancing our customers' experience. So yeah, there's that experience there. They want to be the favorite, so there's some emotion there. But also they're talking about operations. So clearly that operational efficiency is something that is important to the people at the top of that company. H&M's, this is really interesting. Our vision is that all our operations are run in a way that's economically, socially, and environmentally sustainable. Not a single mention of a customer, not a single mention of a product. It's really more about sustainability. Now, you may think that's a good or a bad vision, but what it tells us is what's important to their board of directors. You know, this idea that sustainability is crucial to them. Okay, so there's a couple of examples. And I've said here, there's your first homework. So create a vision for your company. What I would suggest here is to do a bit of a brainstorm and just write loads of things down. Think about those emotions, think about the stakeholders. As crazy as it sounds, it might be a nice idea just at some point, just close your eyes and envision what your business will look like in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, whatever you want it to be, whatever that horizon is for you. Don't think about how many units you're going to shift. Think about how you're going to feel. Think about how those stakeholders feel and look at it from their perspective. And you don't have to be florid and pretentious, whatever works for you. So I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and show you mine here. So Gareth Allen Performance Coaching, working hard with good people who want to be happy. So that's nice and simple. I'm not afraid to work hard. I want to like the people I work with, and I want those people to at least want to be happy. Not everyone's going to be happy all the time, but at least that should be the direction of travel. They're the people I want to work with. Okay, so we spent a little bit of time looking at the horizon there. Now we're going to look down at our feet and we're going to look at what objectives we can set for ourselves. Now, this is not the same as vision. It's a much more tangible, measurable thing. And it's something, it's a means by which you can hold yourself accountable. So if you've recently been in employment and now you are running your own company, the biggest difference is you no longer have a boss to set targets for you. You no longer have a boss to beat you over the head with those targets, which might be nice, but also you no longer have a boss to keep you moving towards those targets, which might be bad. So you've got to fulfill that function for yourself. So we can talk about objectives in different ways. So I've split it into outputs and inputs here. So everyone's business is going to be slightly different. So as I talk about some examples there, have a think about how this might relate to yours. So the most obvious target to set for yourself is a sales target. So units, so if I am a greengrocer, then, how many carrots am I going to sell? Not carrots specifically, but, how many bags of vegetables am I going to sell in a given week on a Saturday afternoon? Depending on what you sell, it might be that your unit is hours. So if you're a coach, then how many hours in a month do you bill? You're doing a lot of, you might be doing a lot of prospecting and talking to people, and that's all good stuff. But the bottom line is sales. How many hours have you actually billed this month? That might be your sales, your output. Basket size. So you've probably heard of basket size. If I'm that greengrocer, someone comes in and buys some apples, are they also going to buy some pears? Are they also going to buy some grapes? What's the size of their basket? The more they spend, the better. Again, they might not physically have a basket for your business, but there will be an equivalent of that. So someone who comes and I'm desperately looking for an example here. So a photographer, someone who comes and they want some portraits for their family. Great. So that's a sale. But how do you make the basket bigger? Maybe you sell them some physical prints. Maybe you do. You offer some kind of enhanced printing services. Another output that you can measure is footfall. So that's the number of people who walk through physically. If you've got a shop, number of people who walk into your shop. If you've got another sort of metaphorical digital way of measuring footfall is website visits. So that's quite a bit easier to measure because it's, generally speaking, websites will just tell you that's all counted up in the background, isn't it? Some businesses are more operational. So, if you've got a warehouse facility, if you're like an e-commerce business and you're sending products out all the time, then a good measure would be how much stock are you losing through breakage and loss. A good operational measure, if you're the sort of business that trades with other businesses. So my greengrocer sells some carrots, he's going to get paid straight away, no problem. But if I am a fruit and veg wholesaler and I'm selling to greengrocers, I'm going to make my deliveries. and then I'm going to send my invoice, and then I'm going to wait. And sometimes it's 14 days, and sometimes it's 30 days before people pay me. And that's a really important measure of my operational efficiency. Do those days drift because I'm not chasing up? So there are lots. It doesn't just have to be how many carrots did I sell. There are lots of different measures which you can apply to your business. Now, they're all outputs, and by that what I mean is they are all a result of your activity. Inputs are the actual activity that you are doing, and these are perhaps easier to leverage and to control. So, for example, how many customers am I going to call in a week? How many meetings am I going to have in a week? They are things that I can directly control by being more active. It could be that, how often do I refresh my advertising? Now, me, Gareth Allen, professional coaching, I like to send out a new kind of social media update once a week. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes life gets in the way and other things happen. So that is a good measure for me of my of inputs as to how frequently I can refresh that. Facebook posts, blogs, etc. Another input, and this one always kind of makes people smile if they're running a new business. How many hours are you working outside of office hours? Are you working at the weekends? Are you working in the evenings? And I'm not saying for a second that you shouldn't. You might want to, but the number of hours you are working is a good measure of the input you are putting in. And if you only want to work 40 hours a week, then you've got yourself an objective. That is something you can work towards. Okay, so have a think about, hopefully I can see people have been scribbling notes there. So have a think about how that would apply to you. And then I want to introduce you to this idea of key performance indicators. So KPIs is a phrase you often hear, an acronym you often hear. And these are the things which are, well, they're key indicators of your performance. So of all those objectives that we just listed, what are the ones that we would pick out that say, actually, that's a really important one? That's key. So I've just picked a couple here. So for example, if I was running a coffee shop, my key performance indicators might be total revenue. How much money do I take from my till every day? Number of unique visits. So how many people actually walk through the door? That idea of having a footfall counter. Let me say, actually, just before I complete this list, as a bit of a tangent, with a key performance indicator, it really needs to be easy to measure. You don't want to be spending hours at the end of the week working out what the result was. Otherwise, it's pointless. It's counterproductive. So total revenue is easy. I just look at my till. Number of unique visits. Well, you can get a footfall counter that goes on the door. If not, then you're going to have to stand there with a clipboard. That's probably not a sensible thing to measure. Spend per visit. So, how much is each person spending? That goes back to that basket size, doesn't it? Or be more specific, number of cookies sold. So for everyone who buys a coffee, I want 30% of those people to also buy a cookie. That's something that's easy to measure. How many cookies did I sell this week? An online example. So an online training company, they're measuring engagement. So these tend to be a lot easier to measure because the back end of the website will help. So unique website visitors, how many pages each of those visitors visited. So, are they just coming to your homepage and then clearing off after 10 seconds, or are they actually going and looking at all your different products? Maybe you've got a free prospectus or catalog on there, which people can download. How many of those are downloaded? How many people sign up to your mailing list? Really easy things to measure. And then that operational type thing. So I talked about losses and breakages, staff active time. So if you've got people picking things in a warehouse, what percentage of the time are they actually working and picking? How long does it take each order to be picked? So on average, is it taking 3 minutes or is it taking 10 minutes for each order to be picked? And that's important, not just so that I don't want to give the impression that this is something you can use to crack the whip and make your staff work harder. You can find things like, for example, if you've got a big warehouse, maybe the most common products are further away from the packing point. So that's something that could easily be fixed and would be highlighted by a slow time per order. So there's all sorts of reasons to look at these things. But again, these things have to be easy to measure. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about SMART objectives. Now, this is a really kind of pretty well-known acronym, so I'm not going to spend too long on it, but SMART is S-M-A-R-T. So when you are setting yourself a goal, it's a good idea to just go down this list and say, is it these 5 things? So is it specific? So for example, not just, I want to sell more. specifically one of my KPIs, you know, I want to sell more cookies. I want to sell 30% cookies. Sorry, I want to sell a cookie with 30% of coffee purchases. Measurable, well, we just already talked about that. It's got to be easy to gather the data, otherwise you're making an extra job for yourself. Achievable. So this is really important. If you're setting yourself objectives, figuring out what that next step is, then it's got to be something that's realistic. This time next year we'll be millionaires. Well, you know, maybe it won't. Maybe in 10 years, but let's be realistic. So don't set yourself up for failure. Set yourself challenging goals by all means, but they've got to be achievable. Relevant. So this goes back to what we're talking about, the K in KPIs, the key performance indicators. What are the most important things and what are your priorities? It's fair to say that some of your objectives may be more important, they may have more weight than others. But what I would advise is don't go crazy with this. If you set yourself, I used to work for Barclays Bank, and at the start of every year we would be sat down and given our targets. There's a problem. But we had, I mean, literally we had 20, 25 different things that we were aiming for. When you've got that many goals, it's very difficult to focus on any of them. So really try to pinpoint the most K of the KPIs and prioritize. And lastly, time bound. So set yourself, so if I'm saying, right, well, at the moment I sell 20% cookies with coffees, and I want that to get to 30, and I want to achieve that by the end of February. So I'm putting a timescale on it, and it's realistic. I'm not saying I'm going to do it by Thursday night. I'm saying I'm giving myself time to actually make that happen. I put there short and long term. What does that mean? What is short and long term? Well, that could be different for different people, you know. But you can set yourself goals for whatever you want. If you have long-term goals, so for example, you know, I want to retire when I'm 55, or maybe you're setting this business up as a sort of part-time thing, you're still working, and you might say, right, well, by November, I want to be doing this full-time and have given up my day job. Fine, they're good objectives, but perhaps a good idea if you've got a long-term goal is to give yourself some stepping stones along the way. So, you know, if I want to retire by the time I'm 55, well, what does that mean? That means I have to be building an asset. So how big does that have to be by the end of this year, by the end of 5 years, et cetera, et cetera? So your homework, should you choose to accept it, it's twofold really. So the first thing is to come up with those KPIs. So what are the most important measures for you? And then set some objectives. So by looking at those measures, what's the number? What number do you want to achieve by the end of March, by the end of 2021, by the end of 2025, whatever the time scale is for you? Okay. I'm going to give you some examples, just of some goals which I am smartening up and turning into objectives. So my example there, I want to sell more coffee. Now that's not wrong. I do want to sell more coffee. That is not incorrect, but let's try and make it a little bit more smart. So I want to increase the turnover of my shop 10% month on month between August and September. I'm betraying when I wrote this presentation, don't I? But yeah, between obviously it might be takeaway at the moment, but the point stands, whatever your business. So we're talking about a time scale, month to month, and we're talking about a specific target, 10% increase. Second example, I've already talked about that. I want to retire at 55. So I need to build a business asset that I can sell. I've worked out that I need it to be worth about £150,000 by 10 years time when I'm 55. So that is a perfectly good, smart objective, but that is not going to influence what I do tomorrow. What I need to do is to say, right, if I'm going to achieve that, then by the end of 2021, I need my business to be worth X. I don't know what that number is, but that thought process is what will help me to get towards that number. I talked before about inputs. So what I want to do is make 5 calls every day. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. That is a nice thing to work towards, but I'm not sure that's realistic, because some days I have webinars to present, some days life gets in the way, and making 5 calls every day might not actually be feasible. So what I've done is I've said, using our customer database, I'm going to proactively speak to 15 clients by phone each week. So now you'll notice that 15 is not 5 times 5. My number has gone down. I think that's a more realistic number. 15 each week. That gives me some flexibility across the week. And I've been a bit more specific here. I want to speak to the client, not make 5 calls a day, because you can often make calls, get voicemails. I'm going to keep going until I have made those 15 actual conversations. So that's a really good, smart objective. Actually, yeah, each week. I guess I've not put from now. That would make it properly time bound. But that's something that I can work towards, and I can measure myself. You know, all I need is a bit of post-it note on my desk, tick it off every time I've done one. At the end of Friday night, have I done 15? That's easy. The hours thing, I want to work less at the weekend. Again, that is absolutely fine. But I'm going to be specific here. The reason why I want to work less at the weekend is because last season I missed a couple of my son's football matches, and he wasn't happy about it, and neither was I. So my objective is this season, I'm going to attend all of my son's football matches without fail. Now, if I do that, I know I'm going to work fewer hours. But actually, the number of hours I'm working is not what's driving that. What's driving that is I need to spend time with my family. And so if I make sure that I am doing that and I work late on a Thursday night instead, that's all right. Okay. So this is the last slide in the expectations section. So we've talked about the horizon and the vision, and we've talked about those next steps, the specific, well, the SMART objectives. So think about what are your KPIs, and then think about how to set yourself some SMART objectives. And remember, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in motivation. Remember, you don't have a boss anymore. So this will only work as well as you make it work. So you need to keep reviewing these and holding yourself to account. Let's move on to the next one, which is capability. Excuse me, I'm just going to have a little drink. Right. So we've got competencies. What are you good at? We've got, I've sort of put that in brackets and with an exclamation mark because I don't want to say incompetencies because it's a bit rude, but what are your gaps? What are you not competent at? And then what are the unknowns? There will be stuff in the next year that you come up against that you are not good at, that you don't even know exist yet. I'm not going to tell you what they are because I don't know either, but we'll come on to that. So let's talk about those competencies first. What are you good at? And your homework here is to start to make a list. This is, if nothing else, this will help you in terms of your confidence. Now, what this tends to be are the core skills of your occupation. So if you're setting up a business, then you're probably doing that because you have some expertise or some passion in that area. So for example, you know, if I'm a landscape gardener, my skills are, I'm really, you know, I know color schemes, I know plants, I'm really good at water features, and you know, I've got good technical skills because I've been a gardener for 15 years, so I know all about gardening. There might be softer skills. So what are the I'm going to say business skills that you are good at? So for example, you know, I'm quite good at written communication, so I can write a good blog. That's a good skill. Maybe not. Maybe you might say, oh, I'm comfortable cold calling people and talking to strangers on the phone. That's a really strong skill to have no matter what your business. So I want you to kind of start scribbling a list and think about what are the core skills of your business. So I'm just going to pick at random Marta. Marta's a calligrapher. So, you know, I imagine you're pretty good at calligraphy. Otherwise, why would you be setting up in that business? But there are a whole host of differences between being good at something and having a successful business. So think about those, the actual core skills of your occupation, but then think about those softer skills. Think about what are the things, what's the other experience that you bring to bear. And before I move on to the incompetencies, this is a really useful exercise to do, just to think about what you're good at, because it's a nice little way of giving yourself a boost. But also, when you look at that list, think about how else might you use those skills. This could be something. This could prompt you to think about how you might diversify your business. So if you're good at this thing, how could you use that skill somewhere else? All right, well, let's move on to the improvement areas. You see, I daren't say incompetencies twice. I can't live like that. So we've gone to improvement areas. Where are your gaps? So this is perhaps the second page of your list. You're obviously just writing this for yourself. No one's looking at it. Don't be embarrassed. Absolutely, you know, it's better to get out in front of something you're a little, where you lack confidence or where you lack experience. I would really advise you to never try to blag it. It's always better to say that you don't know something, or you need a bit of help, or you're going to bring in someone who helps you with that, whatever it might be. So perhaps there might be some of the core skills of your occupation. So I'm a gardener, you know, I say, yeah, I'm really good at water features. I've got a great eye for colour, but I've got very little experience of felling trees. So if you've got a big tree in your garden, I'm not really sure how to get the stump out and all that sort of thing. I've never really done that before. So you might be really good at your job, but there might be areas of that job where you're not strong. More likely, these areas of improvement areas are going to be non-core skills, the business of running a business. So it might be that marketing, you've got very little experience in marketing, your social media makes your head spin. IT, gosh, we're all on a Zoom call right now, which for my business in the last 10 months has been absolutely crucial. So if you're really nervous around that, then that's something you're going to have to improve at. The bookkeeping side of things, invoicing, VAT returns, all that kind of stuff, insurance, funding if you need it. So there's all sorts of, I'm hoping that by now you've got a nice unnerving list of things which might be worrying you. It's better to write them down and see them than to just have them in the back of your mind. But then the question is, what are you going to do about it? Now there might be there might be some things on there which are not urgent, and it's obviously important to prioritize. So, you know, if you're just starting your business now, you're not going to need to do a tax return for another year. So that might not be something that you prioritize this month, but you absolutely shouldn't forget it because it is something that will have to be done. So there's two things that you can do to fill those gaps. You can fill them yourself, or you can get someone else to fill them. So when I say fill them yourself, you can go on training courses, or perhaps just less formally find someone who can help you, upskill you. So the example I had there, you know, I know someone who's a tree surgeon, and what I will do is bring him in to help. But while he's doing that, I'm going to learn from him. I'm going to help him with the water feature side of things, and we will work together and help each other. So it doesn't have to be a formal NVQ training course. You can upskill yourself without getting a qualification. It could be that you've got a partner. It could be that, you know, you're not a sole trader, but you've got someone else within the business who sort of fills your gaps and you fill their gaps, and you can work together really well. But it could be that you outsource it. So, you know, the example that I gave earlier about bookkeeping, you know, I'm working with a guy at the moment. He's like a contract electrician, and he's really good at his job. He's grown his business so quickly. He's only been trading about 18 months, and he's now got people working for him. It's great, but he's rubbish at all the bookkeeping by his own admission. And he's just brought someone in to do it because he could spend hours and hours of what he would consider wasted time balancing his books and so on. But he can use those hours doing something more productive. So he pays someone else one morning a week. They come in and they do his books for him. And that's fine. So it's always a balance of time versus money, you know, and particularly early on in your business journey, you tend to be, I'll spend the time doing it because you haven't got a lot of money, and, you know, you're quite happy to work long hours, but that's not sustainable. So you either need to improve or you need to bring someone in. So that list that we've got there, what I would suggest is, if you create that list of gaps, what I would suggest is a couple of things. Number one, give yourself a mark out of 10 for each one of those. You know, where do you consider yourself? So bookkeeping, I'm a 3 out of 10. I can do the invoicing, but I'm not really sure on the rest of it. And then perhaps give it another mark out of 10 as to how important it is. And this is a very crude, rudimentary system, but if you add those numbers together, then the bigger number is probably where you want to focus your attention. Okay, so let's talk about the next thing, which is the unknowns. Now, you can't make a list of these because you just don't know what they are yet. But I want you to be prepared to find some new hurdles that you haven't seen yet. I mean, I can't think of a better example than 1 year ago, I would have been stood in front of you doing this in a room in York, and I had never heard of Zoom. So we talk about unexpected hurdles, then the coronavirus gives us all a beautiful example of what can hit us from out of left field. but I knew I needed to do this, so I did some training. I did do a training course, but then, you know, just built up my experience, and I feel like I'm kind of comfortable with it now, and I know what I'm doing. And so just as with that example, there will be things that come up that you can overcome. A lot of the things that might come up might relate to employees. So particularly if you're not employing anyone at the moment, taking on that first employee is always a big step, and that can bring with it a whole host of potential problems. And I don't just, there are administrative things like running a payroll and making sure you've done all the contracts properly and all that, but I don't really mean that. What I mean is leading someone, motivating someone, holding someone to account, dealing with underperformance, perhaps rewarding over all of those things that come with being a boss, which, you know, again, there will be things that you can anticipate and things that you might not anticipate. So how do you find out what these unknowns are? Well, a really good tool is to do some shadowing with other people. So if you are lucky enough to find someone who's a mentor, perhaps someone within your same industry who's more experienced, who's prepared to help you, that's great. But not necessarily someone who's in exactly the same industry. You know, they might consider you a competitor, so they, you know, might not be all that conducive to help you. But like my electrician friend that I mentioned, you know, he's got a really close friendship with a guy who's a builder. So they actually work together sometimes, but they're not in competition with each other. But they experience a lot of the same problems with running a gang of lads in a van who might not turn up where they're supposed to, and so they can help each other out and just share that experience. And we call them strategic partners, which is a bit of a business consultancy type phrase, but essentially it's someone with whom you can share your experience and learn from. Networking can really help here. So I'm a member of a BNI network, but there are lots of different kinds of network. Most of them are meeting virtually like this at the moment, but eventually we'll get back to face, and that's been really useful for me. So in my group, there are other people in the financial world, an accountant and financial advisor, but there are the electrician I've been banging on about. He's a member of that group. And there are lots of different people from whom you can learn lots of different things. So I would really recommend some networking. Other ways to learn what else you might need to learn. Ask your stakeholders. We already talked about all those stakeholders. So, you know, if you've got suppliers who've been in the industry for a long time, it might be worth having a chat over a cup of tea with them and you know, saying what's next, what should I expect to happen next. They'll be able to give you some good advice. If you've got like honest friends and colleagues, will be able to tell you a little bit more about where you need to work and where are your gaps. And here's an idea: if you have a good enough relationship, what about talking to your old boss? You know, if you left on good terms and you've got a good relationship, they know you pretty well. So it's a good person to speak to. So this homework, this training needs analysis, exactly the same thing as what we just said. So think about what are those gaps. Think about how important those gaps are. Think about how urgent they are. So for example, you know, there might be a lot of skills that you need to develop in terms of being a leader and managing people, but that's not urgent because you ain't got any employees yet. You know, so that's something to think about a little bit further down the line. So then decide, you know, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to outsource it? Or are you going to improve yourself either on a training course, a formal training course, or just go out of your way and find ways to improve? Okay, so we talked about expectation, we talked about capability. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about motivation. And I really do think that this is the glue that holds it all together. I've got to be honest with you, a lot of new businesses fail. That is an incontrovertible fact. My opinion is that the vast majority of business failures are because of this, because people run out of motivation, they run out of steam. And obviously that's not universal. There are other problems which can torpedo a business. God knows we're all in the middle of one now. But eventually people just think, this is not worth it, I'm going to go back and get a job. And it's just running out of that motivation, which is the final nail in the coffin. So I've kind of put there, make a list of reasons, and this is something, again, you can kind of scribble a list of why you are in business for yourself. But what I wanted to do is to split those reasons in two, and what I'm calling push factors and pull factors. So my analogy here is a river. We're going to wade across this river. So where we are now, we're not happy. That's where we want to be, and we've got to wade across that river. And what is motivating me to get into that water and start wading? So the pull factors are what are pulling me to the other bank. So that everything that we talked about when we talked about vision, that emotion of where I'm heading, that there might be financial factors. You know, I want to earn £1 million, whatever it might be. You know, I want to have a good life. I want to be able to go on holiday. That life balance. You know, I don't want to spend hours I want to be able to, so for example, I want to be able to run my business from my home so that I can spend time with my kids and that I can have that balance and I don't have to be running around all over the place. Fulfillment, you know, I want to feel like I'm achieving something. I want to feel like I'm helping businesses and that they are benefiting from what I do. And I want to feel good about that. I want to feel, I don't want to feel stress. I want to feel happy. Ego. Now, I think this is, I always sort of smile when I say this because I think this is an interesting one we should probably acknowledge. I've got my name over my shoulder, Gareth Allen Performance Coaching, that's me. I think we have to acknowledge that you might not have your name in your business, but you know, I want to run my own thing. I'm proud of this. I want to have my own thing. And there's a little bit of ego tied up in there. And I'm going to acknowledge that. I'm not going to be embarrassed about that. And passion. This is what I want to do. I love doing it. And that's really, you know, I want to do what I want to do. And that pulls me all the way. I want to keep doing the stuff I enjoy. All great stuff, all getting me across that river. Let's talk about the other side. So this is me 7 years ago when I had a job. These were the things that pushed me into that water. So dissatisfaction. Poor management. Maybe you didn't have that good relationship with your boss. Maybe, yeah, my boss was all right, but it was more about the management from above and the structure within the business. I didn't feel like it was a well-managed business. Company values. Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't feel aligned with the company values. Maybe the job itself just doesn't stimulate. It doesn't float your boat. Doesn't get you going. Doesn't challenge you, you don't feel like you're being stretched. Maybe the opposite. Maybe it's just ridiculously hard and you're going home stressed every night and you're all wound up and that's no good for you. And no, you've got that little or no appreciation. So as we go into a recession, I'll just put this little extra thing here, that when you're, so those push factors were when you were an employee. Now we're all self-employed, but there still might be some push factors. So there's that, as we go into a recession, there's that concern, that worry that our customers might disappear, fear that they've got no money to spend, fear for our own financial well-being. These don't have to be particularly emotional. It's all rational to feel concern. You don't have to cry yourself to sleep every night. There are concerns. So there are negative things which are pushing us forward. Let's just bring all of that together. The point I would like to emphasize, and if you scribbled down some, you remember I asked that question a couple of minutes ago, why are you doing this? So I would hope that when you scribbled down some reasons, you're going to have a bit of both here, some pull factors and some push factors. It is incredibly important to focus on the pull factors. And the reason is twofold. Number one, the push factors are quite negative. So, you don't want to have those negative thoughts clouding you. But also they're temporary. If like all of these push factors about my old job, they disappeared. They disappeared the day I quit. So I'm halfway across the river. And if the only thing pushing me is my boss was crap, my boss isn't crap anymore. So there's no motivation. It has to be those pull factors that are pulling you across that river, because those push factors disappear and it's all about where you're heading. I think I might have overdone it with the analogy, but hopefully you know what I mean. So let's move forward. So let's be a little more practical. I've done my analogy to death. Let's be a little bit more practical about how you can keep yourself motivated as you move along your business journey. So what's missing? So what's missing from when you had a job? That push factor about my boss being in my ear all the time, that's gone. That's great. Is it? With no boss to keep you on track, you're going to need to replace that function. You're going to need to motivate yourself. Hopefully you can do a better job than the hypothetical bad boss, but you still need to do it. And sometimes that might mean asking yourself those difficult questions. So, when we're setting those targets that we talked about earlier, if you don't achieve them, what are the consequences? I'm not suggesting you put yourself on a written warning, but what I am suggesting is that you say, actually, I've not done this. I need to change something, and hold yourself accountable. By the same token, we're talking about motivation here. Reward yourself and say well done to yourself when you achieve something, when you do hit those targets. Now, I've said to you about routine and reminders. So you remember how boring it was doing the same thing day in, day out when you had that job? Well, you still got boring tasks that need doing, and you need to create a framework to make those happen. So, you know, I'm a big believer in diarizing things. I've got my diary is very well laid out. So, for example, Tuesday mornings at 10 is when I do my social media updates, and I update everything. Friday morning, chase the invoices so you can get paid before the weekend. Maybe last Thursday of every month you do your stock take, whatever it might be. You will have those mundane tasks that need doing that are easy to forget. So create routine, create reminders if you need to, have a to-do list, have alerts, whether you use a software, a CRM system, or Google or Microsoft, or just a diary and a pen, doesn't matter. But have a system. You've got to have a system, as Harry Hill used to say. Ask yourself difficult questions. I think I've already covered that. So yeah, a good boss would maybe hold a monthly performance review with you. A bad boss would just open their door and shout at you. Whether it's good or bad, you need to have an equivalent. So maybe you give yourself a monthly performance review. Maybe you review those objectives. Put it in the diary, routine and reminders. What tools can you use? Now, a business plan. See, a business plan, to me, a lot of people sort of pull a face and they think, oh, I only do that when I need to borrow money from the bank. Well, I accept that, but that you're not doing this for them, you're doing this for you. So perhaps if it makes you feel better, if you want to call it an action plan, that might be better. So what we talked about, those KPIs, those objectives. So you've got a list of what is important to you. You've got a list of how you're going to measure yourself against those things. You're on the way to a business plan. The next step is, what are you going to do to make them happen? Who's going to do it? What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? I mean, I've simplified it, but basically that's a business plan. That's an action plan. To think about the measurements, we've talked about those, what goes into that, those key performance indicators, those objectives, those SMART objectives. Remember what I said about measurement? Just make sure it's easy to measure these things. So for me, one of the things I do is I log my activity. So I talked about calling 15 customers a day. I've got a CRM system, so I make sure whenever I speak to someone, it just gets quickly logged in there. Very brief summary of the conversation so I can refer back to it later, just so that I've got a system and I can refer back to things. Reward yourself. So, you know, maybe if you hit your targets in your old job, you might have got a bonus. You might have just got a pat on the back. Fine, whatever. Give yourself a reward. If you do well, then you might have a cash bonus because it's your business, and if you've sold a lot more, then you're going to have a little bit more to spend this month. Think about what you would spend it on. You know, are you a holiday person? Is it, you know, the 2022 dream holiday? Is that what you're working towards? Is it a car? Whatever it might be, but have something to aim towards. But I'm talking long term there, aren't I? Think about smaller rewards. You know, maybe if you've had a good week, you treat yourself to I was going to say a lunch with a friend on a Friday afternoon, but you can't do that at the moment. Maybe a Friday afternoon walk at the moment, but whatever it might be, just those small rewards, whatever it is that you would consider a reward for yourself. And a support network. So this is so important. So as we talked before about replacing the function of your boss, you've also got to replace the function of your peers and the other people in the office and all those folks that you used to just compare notes with and sometimes a bit of a moan with. Do you need someone else to ask you those difficult questions? It could be that you have a formal coach, but it doesn't have to be. You don't have to pay someone to ask you these questions. We talked about strategic partners earlier. So the electrician and the builder, and I know they will regularly have a meeting. They might have a lunch and they just talk about business. So, you know, maybe they'll bring a problem that they've got to the table and they'll have a chat about it. But usually it's not that formal. It's just, all right, how's it going? You know, and you start off and then you get into the nitty gritty of what's giving you problems, and you can hold yourself to account almost using someone else as a proxy. I talked about networking, formal and informal. BNI networking is what I do. And there are lots of online networks at the moment. But informal networking, you can make that yourself. Everybody on this call, you know, you will have other people that you know. Just, you know, make yourself a little bit of time for a half-hour chat with someone. Refreshing ideas. This is so important because remember what I talked about, those pull factors pulling you across the river? that's the vision. That's the important stuff that you're working towards. But even that can become stale, and you've got to keep refreshing it. You've got to keep thinking about new things and thinking about new ways of motivating yourself. And again, it's sometimes useful to have other people to talk to about with that. Okay, I'm going to go back to my Venn diagram because I do love a Venn diagram. I'm going to summarize, but whilst I do that, I'm just going to launch a little poll. So the hub asked me to do a poll. So I'm just going to launch this. If I can just ask you for a little bit of feedback whilst I'm doing that. So yeah, remember this Venn diagram, the expectations, capability, motivation. And hopefully over the last hour, we've gone through that in quite a bit of detail. I don't expect you to go away from here and put all of that into place, because that's not how the world works. But I'm hoping that you've picked up a few things which you think, oh God, that really rung a bell with me, and you can change something. So yeah, expectations, they give you the direction and the stepping stones along the way. The vision is the horizon, the emotional pull. And remember those SMART objectives, they're your checkpoints along the tightrope towards the horizon. Capability, what are you good at? What are you not good at? Deal with it. Don't be surprised by it. Don't get tripped up by those unknown things. Be prepared. And motivation. And again, I would stress this is so important. This is where a lot of businesses fail. Those push factors fade away and you're left with those pull factors. Keep refreshing and revitalizing yourself. And as I said, in all of these things, you can get help. It doesn't have to be a formal coaching arrangement. Think about the stakeholders. Think about how they might support you. You're supporting them, and work together. So let me just show you these two websites. Again, you're going to get copies of this, don't worry. But I would just, a couple of things there. The York and North Yorkshire Growth Hub, if you go to the website, have an explore around. There's so many resources for businesses there. It's fantastic. And also I offer, as part of these webinars, on my website, 45 for you, I've got 3 slots a week, 45 minutes free consultation. And I always say this, I promise it's not a sales pitch. I'm not going to try and sell you coaching. I'm quite happy to just talk about your business, give you any advice that I can. I'd be very happy to talk to anyone. So